Quail, Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. These beautiful plantation homes reflect the fascinating history of our culture and cuisine, and I'd like to share this story with you. Why not join me and some of my friends as we visit the plantation homes of our state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana?
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Louisiana Gold and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products. Additional funding is provided by the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, Gumbo, Etouffee, Jambalaya, Beignet. Come pass a good time in Louisiana and say things you've never seen before.
When construction was completed on many of these plantation homes up and down the Mississippi River, and the plaster and frieze work dried, it was time to call in the decorators. Wallpaper and crystal chandeliers were often imported from Europe, and seamstresses came from New Orleans to create these beautiful velvet drapes and bed covers. The wall colorings tended to be just a little bit more subdued, with white and light pastels considered to be in perfect taste. When Louise von Sable came upriver to redecorate her mansion, she created quite a stir in this little river parish with her choice of colors. She chose purples and vibrant blues and fluorescent greens. She even painted the walls and did murals on the ceiling. I'm Chef John Folse. Welcome to the most decorated mansion in South Louisiana, San Francisco Plantation. One of the most unique homes along the Mississippi River is San Francisco. When Edward Marmillion began building his mansion back in 1850, he planned a landmark that would excite an interest of passing traffic along the Mississippi. Although the home is antebellum, it's certainly not typical of the period. Here in one of the bedrooms are the black cherub ceilings. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and a day bed. Look how gorgeous this is. In the master bedroom, I think an interesting point is the little commode at the end of the bed. But all through the house, the draperies and the furnishings are just astounding. I think you're going to be stunned by walking through this home and seeing what they lived like back then. In the children's room, again, here's some of those mosquito nets. And you know what that's for. The windows were open at night to let air come in, and the nets just kept the mosquitoes away. When Marathon Oil Company restored the home a few years ago, they were careful to make sure that these wall and ceiling paintings were perfectly preserved. They called in experts from all over the world, and they cleaned and chipped away at the paint, but made sure that every detail was well taken care of. Look how gorgeous all of this is. Can you imagine not even knowing who painted these? Here's a ceiling painting and a face of one of the Four Seasons. Look at the nice flowers in her hair. The walls of the foyer open up to extend into a ballroom. I was able to talk to Patsy Torres about Louise's decorating style. Patsy, Louise certainly had an eye for decoration and color. You never see these colors in any other plantation home.
No, you won't, John. This is a very unique house. And when Louise began decorating in 1860, this was the height of the Victorian period. She was also from Germany, so this reflects the colors throughout the house. The walls in the upriver parlor are mauve, and you'll see different colors painted in each room as you tour the house. Behind me, we have a beautiful blue mantel. This is a brilliant blue finished in the false marbling. The draperies in the room reflect an antique style of the period, but look at the finials on the rods. These are fuchsias, and they're finished in gold leaf, which match the painted ceiling in this room. It's a beautiful ceiling. It's original, never been painted over, and during restoration was cleaned and touched up very, very little. And again, the colors in this room reflect Louise's German influence on the redecorating of the house.
Just beautiful. One of the features of the kitchen is this huge butler's pantry. This is where all the sugar, flour, onions, anything needed in the kitchen would be stored. One of the conveniences, though, is this old olive jar that's buried into the floor. Because of our low water table, anything put in this olive jar, like cheese and eggs, would be kept cool all day long. Not much of a convenience today, but just imagine what it was then. San Francisco is definitely one of the most unique plantation homes on the river, not only because of its color and its architecture, but because of its name. Imagine San Francisco on the bayous of Louisiana. People always ask, where did the name come from anyway? Well, San Francisco got its name because when the builder finished designing that home and constructing it, people came up to him and said, how much did it cost anyway? And he said, with an expression of the day, I'm totally sans frusquin, which meant I'm without a penny, I'm broke. So the name stuck over many, many years. San Francisco was what people called the house, and eventually in English, it changed to the name San Francisco. At least that's the legend here, and we tend to believe it. And he must have been without a penny. Well, you can imagine that home was on the Mississippi River, and being right about 100 yards or so from the water, you can imagine the amount of seafood that would have been used on the tables of that home. And, of course, there was a tremendous Creole influence of New Orleans back then, so bouillabaisse, that rich seafood soup of the Mediterranean, would certainly have been served there often. And in some of the records that we find on San Francisco, we do find that bouillabaisse are a Creole-style soup that was called poached seafood, and tomato essence was often on the tables of San Francisco Plantation. And I want to cook that dish for you today. Now, on my platter, I have a lot of the seafoods of Louisiana. Look how colorful this is. Of course, you'll recognize this immediately as crawfish. Here's some of those beautiful shrimp still in the shell, and the Gulf of Mexico is right around the corner, so we would have a lot of these. Of course, oysters. This is a unique little shrimp. This is river shrimp right out of the Mississippi River. You don't see too many of these in Louisiana anymore, but they were everywhere back in those days. And, of course, tomato, and here's some of the meat. The fish itself, this is catfish, and blue channel cat was the preferred fish out of the Mississippi River. Now, here in my black iron pot, I'm going to put a little touch of this buttery flavored oil because I want to saute some of all of the vegetables of Louisiana cooking, because remember, as I said, this is subtropical. Not only do we have a lot of seafood, we have a lot of fresh vegetables, and the Germans who built this house had big vegetable gardens, so onion, celery, bell pepper would have been in every dish. So I'm going to saute some of those nice vegetables in the pot here. I'm going to put in onions, of course, a celery thistle. If you ever think of the thistles that grow on the side of the road all over the South, and of course the North also, I'm sure, was used in the place of celery often in the pots, that nice old thistle that you see with the flowers growing on the top of it. Onion, celery, bell pepper, of course, a little garlic, and from the Creole influence of New Orleans, some of these pretty colored peppers I'll put in here, a little red and yellow peppers. This family was from Bavaria. They were from Germany, so naturally the style of cooking would have been very colorful, just like the home that they built. Once these are sauteed, I'm going to add some of my other ingredients. I'm going to add the tomato down in here, and of course this is definitely from the Creole influence of New Orleans. We'll saute that just for a second into it. You can see how pretty these colors are. They come together in the bottom of this pot. You know, aroma is really great. Now I can start to put in some of my seafoods. I'm going to put in just about half of all of the fresh seafoods. I'm going to put the crawfish, about half of the river shrimp, half of the oysters, and the reason I'm only putting half is because I want this seafood to kind of cook away into the stock. This is a jumbo lump crab meat, and I'm going to just stir this into the stock so that the flavor of the seafood will start to flavor the soup that I'm going to poach the rest of my ingredients in. And I know that these will cook away, so I'll just saute those. Now I'll put a touch of wine, a little white wine. The Marmillion family used vermouth in this dish, but I'm going to put a little touch of white wine and some tomato essence. Now, this is tomato juice. You could use any of the tomato juice cocktail, which is already flavored with a lot of the vegetable ingredients. You find it in all of the stores, or just use plain tomato juice. Put all of this in. You can see that it's looking like a good bouillabaisse, that tomato dish of the Mediterranean. And now I'll add the seafood stock. I took all of the shells of the shrimp and the crawfish and all of those nice ingredients, and I boiled them for just a minute in this pot of water, and I started to get a great seafood flavor in this stock pot. Now I'm going to add about 3 or 4 ladles into my tomato essence, and you can imagine the flavors that's taking place in this pot right now. Onion, celery, bell pepper, garlic, the seafood stock, and of course, the fresh seafood that I put in here. Now, I'm going to allow this to boil for, I don't know, maybe just a couple of minutes to make sure that this flavor comes together. And once it does, I can finish it with a little green onions, just some chopped green onions into it. And what I'm making here is a poaching liquid, what we like to call in Louisiana a coubillon, or a curd bouillon, which is just used for poaching of seafoods. Once this comes to a boil and cooks for a couple of minutes, then I would add the rest of my ingredients. Let's assume that this is cooked a little while. I'm going to put in a couple of these big, pretty head-on shrimp. I'm going to put in some of the little river shrimp. And you notice they're going in the shell. That's very important because I'm going to use that as a garnish in the final dish. I'm also going to put some of these nice pieces of cubed fish. I want you to take a look at these nice pieces of fish. I'm going to just drop them in the pot. And then right before the soup is finished, I'm going to come back and add the rest of the finished seafood right before it goes to the table. I can season with salt, put just a little touch of salt in it, some cracked black pepper, some real nice cracked black. I'm not using cayenne, but I'm going to put a little bit of this Louisiana pepper sauce just to give it the spice that would have gone into the pot, and a couple bay leaves. And just let this sit and simmer. You don't want to boil it away because you'll break up all of the seafoods in the pot, but just let it sit and simmer for, I don't know, 15 minutes or so before putting your finished fresh seafoods, and just let them come up to temperature. Just let them warm up in the stock for a couple of minutes, and we're going to serve it up later. I'll show you exactly how that's done. So I'll move this off of the heat and let this sit here before we finish the rest of our seafoods. Now, the next dish that I want to do for you that was done at San Francisco Plantation is a quail dish. And, you know, I was reading the other day a very interesting story about quail. Now you have to go to the Bible for this because there's not many foods mentioned in the Bible. I always say that garlic is mentioned in the Bible. But there's a story in Numbers, one of the first books of the Bible, chapter 11, verse 31 to 34, I think, that says that when the Israelites were going through the desert and they were out of food, that God allowed quail to fall all around them in the desert, and there was quail a day's ride on each side of the camp. That's how much quail was available for the Israelites to eat in the desert, if you can imagine. But quail was also a very big part of Louisiana cooking because it could be raised in pens like partridge or like pheasant. So there was a lot of quail available. Not only that, quail tend to kind of they don't fly very much. They kind of run around, so they're easy to capture. So quail, very important dish. And quail on toast is something that was done at San Francisco all the time. So I want to share the quail on toast recipe. And on my platter, I have 4 little deboned quail. I've taken the bones out of the breast. Of course, the bones are still in the legs and wings, and you can buy them this way in the grocery store, already boned. I think they cook a lot better that way. Of course, you can get them bone in as well. Or just go to one of the little markets. You can find farmers that will bring the quail in. Once I season them with a little salt and pepper, I can do that on both sides. I'm going to dust the quail in a little flour because I want to just coat them to keep them from getting too overcooked. You want to make sure that the flour will coat the outside and keep them nice and moist inside while they're cooking. I'm going to go ahead and dust all of them here. And I'm going to saute them for just a second in a little buttery oil or whatever your favorite oil. You could do it in olive oil, or I'm going to put a little of this buttery flavored oil in here. And just not too much of it, but again, use whatever oil you like. If you like vegetable oil or olive oil, hey, use it. It's fine with me. Okay, I would take the quail now that they're seasoned and dust off all of that excess. Get it off of there and go ahead and put them down. Now you can see how hot that skillet is. It starts to saute right away. All of that extra flour off of there. You can imagine how tender these little birds are going to be once they come out of that saute pan. It kind of looks strange going down in there. Okay, move all of this out of the way. Okay, once they start to saute, you want to make sure that you move them around. You don't want them to stick and break apart because, remember, these are boneless. So I would kind of just make sure that they get nice and brown quickly on one side. And remember that they're going to be cooked in just about, I guarantee you, these things will be cooked in 15 minutes with the sauce. So knowing that, once I put in all of the quail and get them brown on one side, I can start to add some of my other seasonings. Now, I'm going to add a touch of onions, a little bit celery, again, the typical flavors of Louisiana, a touch of garlic, and then my real seasoning is going to be plums. This is fresh plums. Of course, you can use blackberry or any other fruit, and a little peppercorns. I'm going to put some red peppercorns for color. Now, this is the part that I really like when I'm doing quail. I have to flame the quail in a little brandy. Now, of course, you can use any wine or eliminate the wine, but be careful when you're putting brandy in a hot skillet because it will flare up normally. So move it off of the fire like that. And see that? I told you it was going to flare up, but only for a minute. And then it goes out right away. And I'll put a little bit reduced consomme. Look how pretty that is. This is beef consomme right out of the can, and allow that to saute for a minute. Season it with a touch of salt, a touch of pepper, and I'll let this cook for just a minute or so, and I guarantee you this is going to be a masterpiece, just like the Marmillion family did on the tables of San Francisco. Now, once my essence of tomato is cooking over here, I can add all of the rest of my ingredients into the pot. And I want to show you this quickly. I've got a little bitty terrine here. This is a little fish terrine, very pretty little terrine. And what I'm going to do is take some of the croutons that have been painted with garlic, and I can take a ladle, and I want to show you how I would serve this essence. If all of the seafoods are done, as you can see here, I would put them right on top of the garlic croutons in the terrine and put this right onto the table as they would have done at San Francisco Plantation. And I'm going to finish the quail. I'm going to actually serve that on top of toast in just a minute, and that's going to be what I'm going to eat for my dinner tonight. Look at this bowl. Asparagus. Another great classical dish that was served at San Francisco Plantation. You didn't see much of this on the river, but San Francisco grew it. Imagine how great they must have eaten over there day in and day out. Okay, I told you that my good friend was coming to visit with me today, one of the Marmillion family. Hey, come on in, Norman. How are you doing?
Fine,
Great to see you. Norman, you are the great-great-great-grandson of the builder of San Francisco Plantation, right?
Edmund Marmillion.
Edmund.
I didn't want you to cook any more of these recipes from the plantation without having this silver spoon from the plantation.
Well, I tell you, this is a great spoon. Now, this was actually from the original
yes,
home?
Louise Marmillion, the one that you talked about. This was her service, and her initials are on the back of the spoon.
Now, tell me about this outfit. This looks great.
I don't walk around like this every day. I'm president of the German-Acadian Coast Historical Society, and once a year we have a festival, and we wear these costumes. This is a costume which shows the way the Germans who came to Louisiana in the 1720s dressed.
Well, I tell you, it's really nice and colorful, and it's, I can imagine, now this would have been a social dress, obviously.
Oh, yes.
They wouldn't have been working in the
They wouldn't have
fields
been working in their vegetable gardens here.
I mentioned the Marmillions were great vegetable growers from Germany, and one of the dishes that I noticed when I was out at San Francisco was this carrot spice cake that the Marmillions did. And I want you to help me make this so we can share this recipe.
Great.
First, of course, carrot cake is very famous, but this is a spiced carrot cake, and I've boiled the carrots, and we've started to kind of just mash them down into the bottom. And how about adding those ingredients? I have a little milk there, put about half of that in there, and then a little butter, that's good, and then a little bit butter, and I've got a great recipe that for this cake that came out of San Francisco, and I tried it, and it's really wonderful. Put that one egg in there. Just, kind of mash that. I'll mash it in there, just pour it in, and just put all of those seasonings. That's a little bit vanilla, orange, of course, that's cinnamon and nutmeg, all of the good spices of German cooking, as well as all the other. Yeah, tear up this orange mint here after you put in the, after you put in that good vanilla, and I'll put in some pecans and raisins. There you go, just perfect. And then I would dust in about 2 cups of flour. I can dust that right in there like this, and about a cup of sugar. And I would pour this into a bundt-style pan once I get all of the batter mixed. And this cake is not only a pretty cake, but see how it smells, that great aroma.
The spices are so strong.
Isn't that nice? Really, really good. I would put this into a bundt pan. I want to show you what it looks like once it comes out of the oven. Now, your great-great-great-grandfather ate this cake many days at San Francisco Plantation. Just a beautiful orange spice cake. Isn't this not? I mean, a carrot spice cake. Isn't that nice with that orange icing on top of it? Just really great. Hey, let's have a seat and talk about San Francisco Plantation a little bit. You know, it's obviously one of the most beautiful homes on the river, and you're from the family. Tell me a little bit about them. Where did they come from?
Well, the Marmillions were from France, but when they came to Louisiana, they married the Germans who were already here on the river. And Edmund Marmillion was my great-great-great-grandfather.
So he came from France, but now the Cajuns were here, and there was a big German settlement there. I had always thought that family came from Germany, but I guess that he just either married in or...
Well, his great-grandparents were from Germany, who came to Louisiana in the 1720s. And then his son, Valsen Marmillion, married Louise von Sebold, who lived in Germany, and he married her in Munich and then moved to Louisiana. And she brought her Bavarian artisans with her to decorate the house.
Well, that explains the architecture, the steamboat Gothic style, and all of the colors of that house. It was very unique construction. Is there any stories in the family about about what happened when that house went up with all those vivid colors? Did y'all keep any records of that?
We did hear that Louise's friend that she brought to Louisiana, it was her father who decorated the house, and when her friend saw the house undecorated, she asked her to go back and get her father to come here and decorate it with all the murals on the ceilings and the wonderful door paintings.
Now, you were telling me that my family, which is also German, and your family, which has heavy German influence, obviously, all came from the same part of Germany, the Rhineland. Is that they came on the same boat?
There were 3 or 4 boats, 3,000 of them left, all from the Rhineland, the Folses, the Heidels, lots of others, which today we think are French people, but they're actually of German descent. They came here in the 1720s, and by the time they made it to Louisiana, there were only about 150 left, 54 families. And from those 54 families, members of those families moved up the river and set up their small farms right away.
Now, it's said, talking about farming, that the Germans, I've heard this for years and years, that it was the Germans who fed Louisiana. How could only 54 families feed Louisiana?
Well, when they first moved here, they lived on the property that had been belonging to the Indian tribes. And so they lived with the Indians and learned from them how to grow plants, vegetables, which grew very well in Louisiana. Along with that, slaves from West Africa came on soon afterwards, and they showed the Germans how to grow rice. And so with these 3 different ethnic groups, the Indians, the Africans, and these Germanic Europeans, they were successful in growing some vegetables and all types of foods. And for the first 30 or 40 years of Louisiana's history, they saved New Orleans from famine and starvation.
Now, I was always told that the great smoked meats of Louisiana, the andouilles, the hams, the sausages, were all given to us by the Germans. Now, of course, the Acadians will debate that day in and day out, but which is true?
You were told right. You were right. And it's in your blood, I can tell you. You know it's right.
The Cajun culture, though, today, most people think of South Louisiana as Acadian, so that culture obviously overpowered the Germans at some time.
Well, the Germans were first, they lived under the French, and so they adopted the French language. And when the Acadians came about 70 years after the Germans had arrived, they came in much larger numbers. They intermarried with the Germans, and a lot of that Germanic influence was taken over by the Acadians when they came over and spread out throughout South Louisiana.
Now, you're president of the German-Acadian Coast Historical Society. What exactly is that?
Well, in the late 70s, we formed our group, a historical society. Right now, we have about 500 members. It was formed because we wanted to preserve our heritage here. It's a very old part of the state of Louisiana. We have, as you can see, a lot of wonderful old plantation buildings, but we have our own little subculture, just in the same way that the Acadians have. And in the last generation, we have lost so much of that. We've lost our French speaking, and we got together and wanted to study our roots and find out what history we had, and let's try to preserve it.
Well, Norman, y'all doing a great job of it. I get a letter from you once a week or so on it, and keep up the great work.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate it.
Great.
And thank all of you for coming as we continue to cook up more great Taste of Louisiana. Let's try some of this fish soup. Can't wait.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products. Additional funding is provided by the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, Gumbo, Etouffee, Jambalaya, Beignet. Come pass a good time in Louisiana and say things you've never seen before.
Chef John Folse's Plantation Celebrations, Recipes from Our Louisiana Mansions, is a full-color 335-page book containing food history, recipes, and over 150 photographs from these southern landmarks. For your copy, send a check or money order for $28.50 to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 7860 Anselmo Lane, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Or use your credit card by calling toll-free 1-800-973-7246.